screen this because I always forget. Hey guys and girls, welcome back to Friday Night TCG Talk. I am Poketin King, and I am joined by Charlie from Cardnomics. You're the first guest to return to the Friday Night TCG Talk. So, how have you been?
Yeah, excited to return and back with better equipment so you can probably understand me a bit better now. But yeah,
Yeah,
definitely been good, definitely been busy. There's a lot going on in the trading card scene, and always a pleasure to speak to you, Jamie. So looking forward to this one.
yeah, it's going to be the progression since the last obviously episode where you had just moved. I
Yeah,
think at the time, and your setup was just a bit chaotic. And now obviously you've got your setup. You can see stock in the background, which is great. They're the kind of that's the visual that I
yeah,
wanted, but I don't have the space for it at the moment. So there's a few things that we've kind of discussed beforehand that we kind of want to talk about. So you wanted to talk about
yep,
my journey within TCGs and how that progressed to creating a business and making content and stuff. Um,
yep,
so with in terms of that, I guess we start where the start for a lot of people how they got into these card games was obviously as kids, the Pokemon craze. I felt like it was such a perfect time for anybody's in their 20s and 30s that the boom happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was huge. Everyone was collecting. They were watching the TV. They were playing the games and stuff. And then there was kind of this dip that happened in like the EX era when Pokemon started printing the cards themselves. Wizard of the Coast lost the licensing rights to do that, and it just went a bit quiet for a lot of people. But as well as that, that was also the time that Yu-Gi-Oh came out. So I think a lot of people had just sort of jumped ship to the new cool shiny, card game. And I never really lost my passion for Pokemon. It was a lot of my friends grew out of it and they sort of found other interests and stuff. They wanted stuff that was a bit older and not childish, but it was always something that I very much had a love for, and it naturally just progressed into collecting cards, started making content when I was about 12, 11 or 12 years old, and it was just crappy on my bedroom floor going through binders, opening packs. Obviously, the packs back then I was opening old Wizards of the Coast, like first edition base set packs and fossil packs and like EX era. And it was
yep,
looking back on some of them, I obviously hindsight, isn't it? We didn't think the game was going to get to where it is now. And so that was kind of like, the progression from, collecting. Then I started buying and selling. Um, and then it kind of just became sort of basically, a big part of my life doing all of those things. And then I did stop as I sort of got a bit older into my teens, as I didn't have time to make content. And because at the time, I had about 4 YouTube channels. So I was doing Pokemon content, I was doing piano tutorials because I played piano at the time. I was doing game walkthrough tutorials, and I was also making like comic book and video game content as well. So I had so many different channels. I ran I don't know if you remember Tiny Chat. It was a bit like Skype,
no,
but it was browser based, and we had our own chat, and then every night we'd like stream a Pokemon movie. So we'd all like watch it together, and so like that kind of transitions to like building communities. And I've always been a part of like forums and groups in general online. I didn't have many friends in person that liked Pokemon, so naturally you try to find them online. And that even before the boom and before the big boom of social media, there was always places. You had Pojo forums, you had Poker Beach forums, you had like E4 as well. There was a few others there that were kind of like hubs for people that shared the same passion as you did to talk and display and buy and trade as well. Um, and then I stopped for a few years when I was in college trying to be a chef because I just didn't have the time. I was still playing the games and I was still collecting, but I stopped making content. I was kind of doing things privately, and then sort of I started posting on social medias, like on Instagram and stuff like that, throughout my sort of early 20s, and then in 2019 I did a post showing my legendary bird tins, and I remember posting it in the evening because I didn't I hadn't seen anyone else with these tins, but I didn't necessarily think it was a big deal. Like, you always thought of like Wizard of the Coast boxes and Charizard as being like the big ones, gold stars and stuff. But I never really thought of like what I was collecting as being like something that was like really rare. And I remember posting it online. I put the photo up, and it was just the photo of the tins in the display on my carpet. It wasn't a great photo. And then I went to bed. And then I woke up the next day, and it had got I had like hundreds of DMs. It had like thousands of likes, and I was like, you know,
What's
what
going on?
what on? Yeah, I was like, what the fuck? And everyone was like in my DMs saying, "Oh my god, how'd you get these?" I had Leonhardt and TCA Gaming in my DMs, and I was just like, and
Dude,
they're both trying to like ask to buy them, which was quite mad, honestly. I'd had the community in Pokemon, and I was fairly well known in the UK community, but in terms of like global reach, I didn't really have that much of one. And that post just blew up, and it kind of I just became known as like the Poker Tin King because I kept posting my
nice.
tins. Um, and it sort of went from there, and then it gets transitioned to it made sense to set up a business for me. Like, I had always done this my whole life. It was just obviously not to the extent that I do now, but I've always been making content. I've always been collecting. I've always been buying and selling. So it's just like I know how to do that better than pretty much anything else. Um, so yeah, it's been. I'd say, when did I start it? I started it in it's about a year and a half now. I've been doing it, and about a year full time. But it'll be a year in November full time, so about 9 months now. But yeah, that's kind of the in short journey. Obviously, lots has happened over the years, and I've come in and out of things, and just you adapt as you go. But that's the kind of gist. I don't want to talk for too long. Just me talking.
Yeah, that's all right. No, look, I think it's important to remember where you come from and the story behind it. Like, we've all got our own story. It's good to share it. I think
Yeah,
the things you touched on then, and one thing that sort of come into my mind was sort of the progression of technology, in
yeah,
terms of the platforms you use, how you used to communicate with people, and how that's grown over time. But the one thing that doesn't really, that time doesn't affect is the presence on camera, and that those hours that you put in doing content, that can be done in any scenario. And I think that, if getting that experience, is really key to becoming, one, a good content creator, and, two, getting more comfortable with everything and just getting better,
yeah,
just in general. So that's kind of something that, this is all new to me. Like, I'm sure my content isn't the most like visually pleasing, but I'm gonna get better over time. And I think the main thing for me is like now I'm giving it a go. And what's really important that I believe is what's actually, what I've actually got to say.
yeah,
So, all the other stuff helps. People like to look at something that's polished. But I think even as a start, just to like get out information and share your thoughts. And again, without worrying about judgment, which is a key thing. Like, don't worry about what other people think. You're gonna get people like I already had the first, person come on my first video, trying to talk, smack about stuff that I'm doing, and it's like I'm at a stage in my life where that stuff doesn't affect me, and I kind
yeah,
of can laugh it off. But you know, there are people out there that are very sensitive to that, and might be a reason why people either don't do content to begin with, or are afraid to keep going when stuff like that happens. So,
yeah,
like, I think the more you do, the more you're in front of camera, and the more you sort of develop that sort of that hard skin to take that stuff, is going to like put your leaps and bounds ahead of anyone else. So I think that's important to
yeah.
touch on. But I'll have to ask you now. Like, we've heard about your journey, so tell us the transition into that sort of collecting that content creator, that guy building the community into doing a trading card business, and just that transition there, because I went through a similar thing. It was sort of a natural thing for me, to start selling off the massive collection I've amassed, and get into the game in that sort of level. Uh, Again, how did it happen for you? And if you just want to share a bit about that.
Yeah. I think, for me, as you said about sort of the community aspect, I was always, admins of group chats. I was always buying and selling. I love the I love the hustle of it. Honestly, my family call me a bit of a Del boy from like Only Fools and Horses because I really enjoy it. I excel when I can talk to people in person. Obviously, a lot of it is online and stuff, and it's a bit different. You have to kind of you have to personalize the way you talk to people. Every person, every customer, every experience that you have needs to be slightly personalized and kind of have a good understanding of reading the room, which I think really helps. And I think I got to a point where, for context, my full time job, I was head chef and I was head of training for 10 sites. So for 10 restaurants, I was constantly traveling to sites. I was barely ever home. Honestly, I was doing 100-hour weeks, and I was just like, I've been doing this for so long. Like, I'm tired. Like, my soul was tired. Like, it wasn't a case of like, waking up and you're tired every day. It was a case of you kind of just tired of being tired. And I thought, I don't
Yeah.
think I can do this for very much longer. Um, and I know where the ceiling is with that. Like, I was offered promotions and I didn't want it. I was kind of at the point where I was like, this is as high as I want to go. Um, and you know, what else? Really, what else can I do? I trained as chef. I wanted to be a chef since I was 8 years old, so it's all I've ever known, bar card games. So it felt quite natural. I remember having a conversation with my nan. She's been like, a huge supporter of everything that I do. She has learned to have probably a better understanding than anybody in their 80s about Pokemon cards and card games. And we were having a conversation, and I believe it was when we were in Japan. It was me and her, and we were sort of sitting, having a few drinks. And she said, why don't you maybe try doing like card games? Like, do what you're doing, but maybe try scale that up. Um, because I was doing it alongside it, but during through COVID and stuff, obviously the boom happened. I had the time to kind of put the effort in more so. Like, I could put more time into content. I could put more time into actually, sorting cards out, buying and selling and listing. And, coupled that with, everything that was kind of happening with my job. It's a case of, I think in life, you just know when to take the next leap. You kind of just know that in yourself that this is the right time. And, a few conversations with my nan, and I said, right, when I come back, that's when I'm going to really start. For the first few months, I'll just really be grinding on content, like making sure that I'm, putting out what I want to make. There was content out there that wasn't being made that I felt that could have. And you've seen my content. It isn't polished. It's not heavily edited. I'm not jumping out of planes, opening packs midair. I'm not, doing a vlog of me in Japan around card stores, going around and buying cards that are like $100,000 or whatever. That isn't where my content is. It not necessarily isn't where it's gonna be, but I understand what works for me. And it's kind of obviously helping with my progression. But so that's kind of, where I sort of did with the content and the business, and it just really made sense. And I thought, let me just try it. At the end of the day, if it doesn't work, I've always got a job to fall back on. So I stepped down from head chef, head of training, all the way down. I went from the top to the bottom in a space of a month, um, which was that in itself is a kind of something that I don't really talk about too much. But for anybody that's done jobs where you're in charge, like you're the person, you're the go-to person. I'd been doing it for years, very successfully. Obviously, going to sites and training, and going from that to having zero responsibility, um, watching somebody else basically do my job. I found that very difficult to start with. Like, I really struggled with that, and I didn't really talk about that too much. I kind of buried myself in. I was like, right, well, this is what I wanted. So just lock in and get on it. And so that's what I did. And we are in August now, and I think it's going quite well. I'm happy with the progress that I've done. I think consistency is something that we've talked about before, and it really is just the number one thing with this is being consistent. Whatever you do, just make sure you turn up every day. It's in any aspect of life. There's days where I wake up, people go, "Oh, but you're doing card games for your day job. That must be like that's a dream, right?" Um, and
Yeah, I get that
some
too.
days I wake up and I'm like, I really cannot be asked to sort through another fucking 1,000 cards, but this is what I wanted, and that's what I remind myself that I'll do it regardless of whether I'm in a good mindset that day or not. I'll still do it regardless because it has to be done. And ultimately, the only person that will be let down is me, really.
Yep. That's good. Again, you touched on a lot of good points there. And I remember when I transitioned to my first business, like the hardest thing for me was to leave that security of knowing what's coming in or,
Yeah,
not knowing what the outcome's going to be, once you take that leap. But I think once I got over there, and this was, before cards, I started a business selling cars. But that transition there was very hard, and I find when I speak to a lot of people these days, like that's the hardest thing, for them to transition into whatever they're doing into trading cards full time. And I understand that it is a tough game. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat you that it's easy because it's not. I spend 7 days a week, many like hours of my day doing this, and it does come at a cost. But when you're starting something, that's the work that's required to put in to be successful. And another thing I want to point out is um, when when you're starting this, I found right from the start, I'm like, what kind of business do I want to be, and what type of customer do I want to attract? So that kind of prompted me to sort of start doing at the start written content about markets and about investing because that's the kind of person I want to appeal to. So I think that was a very important thing for me to touch on and acknowledge before I started because I don't want to be, doing content on, playing a game when I'm not a singles person or I'm not going to do content based on gameplay. So me finding out what kind of, story I wanted to be, really led to like, all right, that's the content I really want to make. And that's the content I was passionate about. And now I'm not doing it on YouTube and, starting that journey. But at least I knew and figured out what kind of business I wanted to be from the very start. And that's the foundation I built that's really allowed me to sort of, catapult me to a level that I am now in a very like quick amount of time. So yeah, that's
yeah.
something that really helped me. I don't know if you have something in there that you thought, one that you done right, or maybe you could have done better looking back.
Um, really to follow on from what you've just said, I did have a vision at the start, and I've actually adapted what I'm doing. Um, and I originally was doing sealed only. I always joked that I'd never get into selling, singles. It was more of like middle to higher end before. And I was, graded stuff and sealed stuff, and it's basically selling what I like to collect myself. And I, I sort of adapted it as it went on because I realized that the amount of people that I'm having to compete with, the sheer amount of people, here in the UK doing sealed, there was thousands of shops that popped up, and there are some huge content creators out there as well that also have shops. A lot of them do the card shows. They'll do a card show every single weekend of the year, and they've obviously had to work hard to establish themselves. Where for me, because I still had my part-time job, I was working weekends, so I couldn't do as many card shows. So it was a case of like, do I do some? So I started vendoring in some, and I really wanted to get flesh and blood out there. The Pokemon stuff at the time it sold itself. And this is before One Piece, before Lorcana, um, and Flesh and Blood didn't do very well. People didn't want Flesh and Blood. They don't care about it because it's a player's game. it's, you know, there are a lot of collectors out there, but if you go to a card show and try sell fab, it doesn't work. I tried it, and you know, still to this day, I do not see Flesh and Blood at card shows in the UK. I might see the odd box here and there, but it is just one box. And so I was doing sealed and stuff, and I was doing a lot of streaming. I was doing card shows, and then it kind of just became a bit stagnant. And I was seeing other people, you know, Pokemon have started evolving into, not evolving, but it went, a lot of people stopped buying graded and stopped buying sealed, and they wanted singles again. They wanted raws. And you had, you know, these huge, you know, a lot of them are, you know, very good friends of mine, but they'll fly to Japan and drop 50 grand every 3 months on singles. You know, they're very well connected with the card stores over there. Card shops will keep product back for them. They know that they're gonna, you know, they're gonna come fly over in March, so they'll keep stuff back for them. They know they'll want, and I just couldn't compete with that. I didn't have the scalability to do that. You know, I didn't have a job that was hugely, you know, pay very good pay in terms of like a lot of people. So I simply did not have the capital or cash flow to do that. So I was like, well, you know, what else can I do? And I started seeing loads of people trying to, you know, over the months and months, I was seeing a lot of people try to sell Flesh and Blood collections, and I was like, let me buy one. You know, I collect anyway. I was collecting and just hoarding at that point anyway. And then I started selling, and I realized, you know, there's not that many people in the UK selling Flesh and Blood singles. There's, you know, a couple of stores that are doing it, but for the most part, it is just collectors and players selling what their spares they have. So there was never anything in mass, you know. It was hard finding play sets of stuff, and you had to buy from Europe. So I started I said, right, I'll try for the next 3 months, and I'll really get into buying collections and stuff. And then, yeah, I just bought like 150 collections in 3 months. And
There you go.
it was, you know, pretty mental. But as fast as I was buying them, I was selling them. And then
Yep.
I sort of just kind of started establishing myself as, you know, one of the big single sellers of Flesh and Blood. And then naturally I was like, well, I sell Pokemon singles, I sell Fab, so maybe I should try do, you know, other card games and stuff. And I've learned over time, some stuff works, some stuff doesn't. Like Lorcana at the moment is a bit dipped. Star Wars first set did very, very, very well. Second set hasn't been as great. One Piece had huge amounts of reprints, so the playable stuff has crashed massively. I pretty much sold out of everything before they did the reprints, so I've, you know, not really got much of that. But I think it's important to kind of adapt what you're doing. Sometimes things will work for a while, and I think this is why a lot of LGSs and a lot of online businesses have closed over the last few years, is because they had a business model that worked for years and then it stopped working, and
Yep.
they've done it for so long and they don't know. They're like, well, then they start going, oh, but well, it's the customers, it's not me. Like, I've done this for 20 years, it works. But we know life changes, you know, and I've spoken to so many stores. I did a kind of I wish I'd kind of vlogged it really, but a few years ago I traveled and visited loads of card stores across the UK, and I was sort of speaking to the owners, and a lot of them, you know, it was mostly about Flesh and Blood, but a lot of them were saying sales in general have dipped. And I go, oh, have you got a website? Oh, well, we have a Facebook group. Okay, well, probably should set up a website. And they're like, oh, well, I don't know how to do that. And I'll be like, well, I'm sure you can find someone, you know, an employer or something to help you set up a website. They're very easy. Or I'll be like, oh, have you got a website? Yeah. Okay. Do you update the stock? Do you push that? Do you have socials? Oh, we don't have any social media. I don't believe in social media. And it's like, well, this is why your business is dying, because you haven't adapted to what the current consumer of TCGs want. And, you know, most of them, a lot of them don't have the time to go to an LGS all the time. They're busy. Life gets busier and busier as years go on. We know that, especially as you get older. You just don't have the time to go to a card store and sit and play games all the time. You might go around your friend's house to play instead. And
Yep.
that's why these stores are, they're kind of sort of losing out really, and that's why I've seen so many close and online businesses as well where they've they only did modern Pokemon because that's all they knew, and then when that became, buying boxes from distro of the brand new set, there's not much margins in it unless you're selling hundreds of cases, which is why companies like Chaos Cards here, they can sell boxes for cost because they do it in volume. But the average business can't, that is selling maybe 15, 20 cases or whatever. Um, so I think, I realized what would work for me. It's a lot of work doing singles, trying to keep up with all the markets, trying to keep up with all your prices being relevant, because that just changes every single week.
Yep.
But it works for me, and it might not work for other people. I think I'm in kind of a unique situation where I have such a passion for card games that I am always naturally keeping an eye on the markets anyway. So I can adjust my pricing. I know that when cards might be meta, I know when cards might not be meta. That was part of why I learned to play, Flesh and Blood. I learned to play One Piece, Star Wars, so I could have a better understanding of how the market worked.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think even touching back on LGSs, and after this, we'll carry on with some more sort of TCG specific stuff. We'll get into a bit of Pokemon One Piece and that more specifically, but I think there's a huge issue, especially here, that I've noticed since I've started a trading card business at the distro level. So we've basically only got one distro that carries a certain game, and there's no other company that sells that. So Pokemon, there's only one. One Piece, there's only one. So there's one particular distributor that only does Bandai games. So there's no competition. That's one issue. And then the
Yeah,
second one is the model that they've got caters to the brick and mortar that does organized play. So
yeah,
in LGS, one, you encourage to do organized play, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's a card game that needs to be played, and people, need a place to play it. But the way that it's geared towards, you're going to get, this stock if you do that, and then the online basically don't get anything. So
yeah,
that really relies on that store, and a lot of them are very bad at marketing. So it's about raising awareness, especially if you're a new game. And if you can't raise the awareness outside of, your 12 or 20 players that you might get every week, who's really going to find out about the game? And they're ending up with all the product to sell. So yes, they got an online store as well, but they still don't do enough. Like say what me and you do to like build communities, raise awareness, and actually, reach out to a bigger audience to so they can find out about this game.
yeah,
I think that's where a big problem lies, where this is where the model needs to change in terms of distributing the game. And that all stems from the actual company that sells the game. They need to recognize what business model works for their game. Another
yeah,
big thing is you're going to make a collectible game. You intend that product to have value. So, when you release something to have value, like it ends up getting, deteriorated by either people complaining that there isn't enough and prices are too high for certain cards, and that ends up results in either overprinting, or if a game can't be marketed, no one's buying it, then stores just drops what stock they've got because they need cash flow. And again, another sign that a store needs money, cash flow, because they've got such big overheads. So that might cause them to sell something, a product that should hold value for less than what it's worth, just for the fact that they can't hold on to the product. There's all these teething issues, so you can't really rely on a local game store to carry a game. Yet the design to distribute their product is based around an organized play store. And I'm pretty sure this happens around the world. And whether
yeah,
it comes direct from the company or it's the distros that have whatever reasoning, but they all seem to sort of be reading the same playbook. And I think that's why we continue to see stores, go out of business, because it's not a model that works. And the models that do work, and the stores that do stay around, they're actually a bit smarter and adapt, and they do reach out and build, bigger communities, and are better at marketing. Well, that's a
yeah,
select few. So you're gonna see all these people come and go. You're gonna see games die that probably shouldn't, because a lot of the product's very good. but it's not getting
Yeah.
into the right hands that can bring awareness to the game. And that could be, plenty of online people like me and you who understand, we might not want to go down that route of doing organized play. I like to appeal to, collectors and investors because let's be serious, like investing or speculation is going to be a part of a game, whether we like it or not, because there's value there and people see, okay, this is an opportunity. So I enjoy that. I enjoy collecting. I found a way to marry the two together, hence, why I started Cardonomics. That's something that I enjoy and focus on, but I found it very difficult to work with distribution and get product that I need to support my community, which makes me pivot elsewhere. So until that's
Yeah.
addressed, and again, I'm not saying give me all your product, but they need to recognize, okay, there is a place for us. There is a place for the LGS that run organized play, but the main consumer is probably that person that plays at home or buys online and they aren't going into a store to play your game. That's probably the minority. Yet, why is your business model focused on that niche of the market?
Yeah. I agree. I think um part of the reason why I pivoted to what I do now is because I can't get flesh and blood from distros because they don't do online. It's only brick and mortars that run events. So I know brick and mortars that don't run events and they still can't get fab. One Piece, the distro here in the UK that I'm with, they stopped One Piece because it was just too popular. So now it's only for brick and mortar stores. I can't get Sorcery. I can't get Lorcana. So I'm very limited with what I can get. So there's no incentive for me to bother buying because I've basically got for flesh and blood now, I have to strike a deal with an LGS and say, right, I want to buy X amount of cases. What's the best you can do? Just so I can crack for singles. Now, I might then price my singles higher because my cost price is higher than the store. Whereas I can name you less than 5 LGSs in the entire UK that sell flesh and blood singles. So they're the only ones that can get access to this product, yet they don't sell singles. So where are the singles going to come from? They're going to come from players opening their 2 packs a week at Armory. They're going to come from collectors that are maybe mass opening for, for their own collection, or they're going to come from people like me who are, mass opening. And, Rosetta, I've got 20 cases come in and I've sold a couple of them, but the rest is going to be cracked for singles. And I've had to pay more than distro price, and it's frustrating. So, like One Piece, I started my local scene. The only reason why there's One Piece in my city is because of me. Because, I was the one that started the group. I was the one that kept bugging the LGS. My LGS, my local one, is very, very good. They're one of the few, as you said, that will excel because they do well. They have Discord, they have Facebook, they have Twitter, but they're constantly posting it. They've got champions of each game start in these communities, Flesh and Blood and Star Wars and stuff. And, they have tabletop space that they rent for people that play Dungeons and Dragons and games and Warhammer and everything. They sell food and drink, it's like £3 for unlimited hot drinks. People will sit there all day and play games with their friends. They'll rent tables out and they'll sit there, have some snacks, drink food, drink and eat food and stuff. And that works, but the loopholes that I've got to go through to try get product just to sell when if it was just a little bit easier and they kind of worked with online stores. I mean, there's some distros that especially in the US that don't take online stores on. They won't take any at all, and you can only be a brick and mortar to work with them, which is disappointing. So the model is outdated. I'm hoping it will change in the next few years. The problem is there's a lot of people that have kind of ruined it for people like yourself and me who are building genuine communities that enjoy the space that we're in. And although we do run businesses, and yes, our priority needs to be to make money to sustain that business, we still actually care. And that's the difference. There are
Yep.
people out there who just don't give a shit about who they're buying and selling from. They don't care what they do, what their actions are. They don't care about building communities. They just want to make money. And they're the
Yep.
ones, unfortunately, that found the opportunity over these last few years. Um, and, I've kind of ruined it for so many of us that, I look at it and think my whole life has been card games, and I I truly can't see myself doing anything else ever now. I think, it's it's going to be a part of me for the rest of my life, but I also love, being able to, build those communities and help. And that's the reason why I started the One Piece one at my LGS. And I don't go every week. I go most weeks. It's the only card game that I actively still play. My deck isn't good. It cost me, it's like 20 quid. It's cheap. I go 2 to 2 each week. I'm never going to win locals, but I just enjoy the community side of it. And everyone that I've met within it has been so welcoming and funny, and we have a good time. But I think the model in itself is the LGS offers a space, but they need to do more to create the community. And I think the way that distros work with the monopolization that they have, I don't know who owns your distros, but I know that the two main distros here in the UK, they are also owned by an American company. They're also owned most of the European distros. So I suspect that 75% of the world's distros is owned by one company. And this is a
Okay.
huge problem, um, because, in every area of the world, monopolization is probably never really a good thing, because once you've got no other option but to order from these distros, because if you want product, you have to use them. And it is a shame, honestly.
Definitely, man. I'll feel you there. I think, did you want to go touch on, while we're on the subject, because I know we wanted to leave it till last, but did you want to go over, what we discussed before about how Altered's doing something different
Yeah,
and how that can help, sort of for companies to be able to sort of capture a bit of that secondary market, sales, where at this stage they can't, so they don't really care about it. So now we had a quick discussion before about it, and I think Altered is probably one of the first companies, or Equinox, the people behind Altered, are one of the first that are trying to innovate in the space and doing this. And I think there's games out there that can really benefit from this kind of model. And again, this idea will be able to give companies the chance to be able to capture some of that secondary market value, which they can't at the moment. And I think if they were able to do that, then they'll start to care more about it, and they'll start
yeah,
to make decisions based on, okay, well, now I can make revenue without reprinting my game or without coming up with a new set every 2 months. That's a sustainable thing that, where everyone's sort of happy and we can control all the aspects of, the card game and the way it's sold to people and ownership of the cards and etc. So we can go into a bit of detail about,
yeah,
their model. Altered's a new game, hasn't proven itself yet, but the concepts they've come up with that they've shown are different and new. And I think that's the direction the world is going into, where this is kind of a half physical, half digital sort of concept, which is,
yeah,
the stage just before going fully digital. And we've seen Dragon Ball go into that space. We've seen Pokemon go into that space. Bandai made that new Dragon Ball game, uh, Fusion World, completely
yeah,
different to try and hit that digital thing. So there are companies thinking about it, and that first step's been taken, to go into that space. And Altered's come up with a hybrid model to suit, both the people at the tangible aspect of trading cards and the digital aspect, because I think that tangible is going to exist for the older people like me and you, or even the older crowd that grew up with Magic, that like to have something and hold it. Whereas the
yeah,
kids growing up, or the new generation today, are all digital. They don't care about the physical. They just want to sit in front of a screen and be
yeah,
able to do what they need to do. It's the convenience. Like we're a world that just loves convenience right now.
yeah,
So just touching on that, I think the way that Altered have created their own marketplace, they've got QR codes on their cards that distinguish each card with its own unique sort of code that makes it harder to copy that card, or we can identify that card and who owns it. I think that's a step in the right direction, and it kind of takes out your eBays, your TCG players, or your card markets, or wherever you may live and what platform you use who take fees anyway. well, why doesn't the company develop their own marketplace with all these features where they can capture part of that? So it doesn't really matter if they're designed a product with chase cards to have value, and say that card sells for 2 grand and they capture a percentage of that each time it's sold. Well, there's no real reason to have to devalue that, that particular, whatever it's card or whatever cards they make, because they can still capture it, and that allows the company, to not have to make these decisions or even have extra, funding to do more marketing and raise awareness for the game. I think it's something that companies should be really looking at. But if you want to give us your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think when we talk about like reprints for games as a way of generating income for companies, I think a lot of people, when they think of reprints, they really only look at, oh well, they're reprinting because there's not enough product, or they're reprinting because the cards values have gone up too high. But people never really talk about, are they reprinting simply because they just need to generate revenue? You look at games like Sorcery, who are releasing one set a year. I struggle to understand how they're going to have any money to pay for things like marketing. Obviously, that's a huge thing. Going to different events like Gen Con, UK Games Expo, Sfila, like all around the world doing these events, getting the game out, which is hugely important. How can they afford to not only do that, but also, give things to stores as well? How can they afford that if they're only doing one set a year? And you'd like to think that that money is potentially will be going back into printing the next set. But how much more? When I look at a game like Sorcery, I think Sorcery has a ceiling. It's one of the few games that I look at a game from that, the get go, and I think, right, that's the ceiling of that game. Whereas you look at a game like Altered, the kind of possibilities are really endless, because you've got that, as you said, physical aspect of it, but you've got the digital where, there's one copy of the card. Now, if you decide to sell it, you can sell it on the marketplace. People already started to sell it on Facebook groups and stuff, and they'll, send the card as well as, the QR scan hasn't been scanned yet. But you've also got uniques where, from what I understand, you can have the same artwork, but the stats are slightly different. The stats will never be the same. So you might have the same card as your friend does, but their stats are slightly different than yours because it is simply unique. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays, because we've really never seen that ever before. I can't think of any game that's done anything to the extent they're doing. But as you said, it appeals to the younger crowd who maybe, not as well, they want digital stuff, but there's a lot of people out there that are not very materialistic, and they don't like owning things. And having it digital means that, you haven't got piles of bulk cards lying around everywhere. Once you've scanned it and you've got it, then, you've got the code and you can do whatever you want with that. And I believe they've done a thing where if you want more copies of the same card, you can contact them, and every 3 months they'll be like, right, in March we're going to ship out all these cards for the last 3 months, and they'll send you other copies. If you do want multiple copies of the same card to play in your deck and stuff. I did a demo for it and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very different. The day, night, and noon phases that you have was quite interesting. It definitely is very tabletop-y, like very board gamey style, for a card game. But I think that probably works for what it's doing. Behind me, I've got my product here. I haven't done anything with it. I've literally opened the box and I've just left it there. I've been debating it. The only thing for me is I can't live stream it opening now because the QR codes. I'm going to have to cover every QR code, and I really can't bother with that. So I'm debating, opening up a box just for the content, but I would need to scan all the codes myself anyway. So I might, when I've got an afternoon or some actual time free, I might have a little look at that. But it definitely excites me. I know the backers for it. So the majority in terms of numbers, the volume was Europe based, which makes sense. It's a French company, and they're obviously in partnership with Asmodee and Game Genic. But the largest in terms of monetary value backers were the US, which, again, makes sense. I know there's going to be people watching here now that are in certain group chats with me that, put a lot of money into Altered, and they're, hoping the game works. And I think you've got a good balance of people that bought in to play, and then others that bought in to, just to see what happens. Like every game comes out, people think, they'll drop 10k into it and go, just see what happens. But I think
Yeah,
Altered, if you're going to release a game in 2024 and you're going to do the same Kickstarter model that everyone else is doing what they've done is very unique. And I think it's either going to work or it isn't. It's simple as that. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't mean that it can't work. It just means that it's kind of back to drawing board. But I think the games that are going to come in the next 10 to 15 years will benefit from whatever Altered is doing right now. I think they've taken that
yep,
leap that other companies might have been afraid to do. Um, and I'm just excited, honestly, to see what happens. It's different. It's such an interesting concept.
for sure. I think I'll just touch on Sorcery too, because how you said about, how I talked about how the Alter bundle could work with something like Sorcery and the problems they might have, with the one set a year, because their only real option, or not only option, but their main option to generate revenue is to print more product. So, if the demand's not there, which at the moment it is, and that's great, but, if for whatever reason that, the set's no good and the demand is not there, and all of a sudden, well, how do I, raise until the next set? What other
Yeah,
option do they have other to reprint the set? I think that's a spot they might find themselves in unless they continue to make, home run products, which is a very tough task. Every product can't really be a home run.
yeah,
You're gonna go through those sets that people don't resonate with. So I think that's something they can benefit from. And with Altered, I just like the way that they're trying new things. And like you said, going in the right direction. It might not work now, and there's going to be teething issues, which is a given. But I think I like the fact that they've journeyed out that way. They've really thought about how their game can appeal to more people. Whereas your Sorcery, and again, I'm not trying to compare the two. They're two completely different games. I
yeah,
really love Sorcery for what it is. It really hits me in a lot of, things that I really like in a card game. And it's never going to be as, as big as something like an Altered can be for reasons, you explained. There's a certain market for that kind of game. But with Altered, you've got gameplay that suits people of all ages. You've got that sort of TCG and game board aspect that can hit both people that enjoy both things. You've got the digital aspect for people that like to do things on the go. It makes things very easy. Or you can also just go and have a physical game with your friends or at your local game store. So there's all
yeah,
these things that they can hit, like the potential, the size of the market they can capture, which is something that really got me looking at the game, and I backed it myself. And the biggest thing that stood out to me, apart from them being a big company and having the experience and working with Asmodee and that sort of stuff, was their marketing. Their
yeah,
marketing is the best I've seen in a TCG ever.
yeah,
So, and that shows even with their Discord over 10,000 people now so early on. The ability to, I got my uh, uncut sheets and stuff that I ordered pretty early. It was all packaged very nicely, arrived in a
yeah,
good amount of time. Very professional. Their updates are always on point, whether they're on time or not. They're always giving updates. Like that to me is a company that really gives a shit about what they're doing, and understands
yeah,
their market and is delivering on on all fronts in that sense. But they're still going to have teething issues with trying new things, which is okay. And I think if anyone, they've got quite a capable team to sort of rectify things as quickly as they can, and they will. So I really
yeah,
like that. It's one to really watch. I think if you don't know about it or it's not on your radar, you should really look into it. Same with Sorcery. Again, it's not going to hit everyone, but if you like that old school sort of magic feel, or that sort of Dungeons and Dragons, or that medieval sort of time, you really like it. Hand painted art. A lot of people behind the game that are really talented. So yeah, I think that is something to look out for. Both those games that are fairly new, if you want something sort of new to look out for. I think talking about now, we'll talk about the main ones on the front. Pokemon, obviously, SV kind of started a bit slow. I always liked it, but
Yeah,
people seem to always be negative if the price isn't going up. So I look at data. I'm not one to go with the crowd. So I'm a very data-driven person. So I'll go back and see, the values of sets or, the value within, the box itself and how that's doing and how the market are reacting with singles. That paints a story to me more than, what people online are saying about a set.
their opinions.
Those are the people that aren't, giving their opinion and talking with their wallet, which is what I look at to see, or kind of gauge how successful or a set or an error might be. And Scarlet and Violet have held up very well. They've actually spread the value amongst a lot of cards, which I like. It's not just one big chase card that if you don't get it, then you're not going to get much value back. I like that about Scarlet and Violet. So again, there's a lot of new things coming up to get people excited. I think they're done with the base Scarlet Violet and the download content that was part of the game. That side of stuff's finished now, and now we can move on to the more okay. Let's give stuff to the older crowd, make them happy, and now it's time to start really making money. So the reveal showed that. We got Team Rocket teasers. You got the battle partners, or the trainer teasers. You've got the EV set. In Japanese it's called Terrestrial Festival, something like that from
Yeah.
memory. You got Paradise Dragona and Supercharged Breaker, which is going to make Surging Sparks English set. There's all these good things coming, and this is what everyone's been waiting for. And I already believe that Scarlet and Violet is good already, and it can be great if they deliver on this. So, do you want to just give us your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think likewise yourself. I remember before Scarlet Violet came out, and I remember being at Worlds in London and back in 2022 now. And when they announced that EXs were coming back, people were really excited about it. It was great. And we always know that they're going to start very basic with new sets. And I actually was quite surprised with Scarlet Violet that we still got the illustration rares in the first few sets, because typically they go back to basics where they'll just have full arts. They'll have the EXs, they'll have the full arts, and they might have golds and rainbows. But the things like alt arts and the illustration, typically they don't release those until a couple of sets in. But out the bat that we got these illustration wares, which I thought, okay. I mean, I don't understand, when you open a box, half of that box is hits now. Now, obviously, they changed it to having one holo per pack and 2 reverse holos. Now, people can debate or talk about or whine about the values of holos and reverse holos, but these sets have got so big now. We need to remember people still master set stuff. And I think getting 2 reverse holos a pack was huge, because trying to track some of those down was an absolute night. It means that you can get every holo in the set basically with a box. Now, I would argue that maybe holos need to get rid of holos, but that's that might be a conversation for another day. But we already started off with a very strong start to the era, and then we hit sets like Paradox Rift and Temporal Forces, and then Twilight Masquerade. We obviously had 151 as well. We had Shrouded Fable. Now we're getting into the spicy stuff, which obviously we got Dragon Pokemon coming back. We've got another EV set, which I suspect will be every year they'll do an EV set now. One thing that Pokemon does well is something that sells well for them, they'll repeat that a few times. And typically they don't necessarily just like do it out, like milk it to the extreme like some games do. I'm looking at you, Yu-Gi-Oh, with your 3rd rarity collection in 2 years. But they manage things very well. And then obviously we've got the Team Rocket set, which is huge. Obviously we haven't had Team Rocket since the EX era. And then we've also got the battle partners, the trainers Pokemon, which are huge. They always do well. I remember when they brought them back in the Platinum era, they had them. They were slightly different, but they brought them back, the Elite Four Pokemon. That was huge. I remember when the hype around that. Pokemon, and this is fundamentally why Pokemon will always be the #1 TCG, is because they have got so many years. They've got such a catalog of very iconic things that they've done that they can fall back on. And I look at games like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic. Yu-Gi-Oh! Have reprinted things like Blue Eyes about 1 billion times. They're coming to the end of what they can reprint. They're reprinting actual full sets from 15 years ago, which is crazy. You look at what Magic do, and they're they'll do blocks where they'll bring back like Ravnica and stuff, but then they also do the Universes Beyond, which I think is what they're really kind of hoping that the game's going to go in. And you've got sets like Bloomburrow, which are actually quite fun, and like Wilds of Eldraine and stuff. But no one ever has, and no one ever will do it as good as Pokemon. Is because you speak to anybody that's collected Pokemon cards, and you ask of their fond memories, and some people will go, "Oh, I remember base sets," or some people go, "Oh, the Neo sets, I really like those," or the E series sets, I love the Crystal cards, or EX, I really enjoyed the Gold Stars, Dark Pokemon, Trainers Pokemon, and there's so many different kind of subsets of stuff that Pokemon have done, and it really does give an unlimited, because they could have brought back Rocket at any point over the last. I mean, Team Rocket Returns was 2004, 2005.
Yep.
So it's been 20 years now.
Yep.
So they could have brought back. The fact that they didn't need to, and they probably still don't need to now, but they're like, do you know what? Why not? And they can do that. They might, in 5 years' time, they might bring back E-Series cards. They could do a set where it's just the E-Series border style, something similar to that. Or they could do like Crystal Pokemon, like, again. They've done Shining Pokemon before. They do a shiny set every single year. The possibilities are endless, and Scarlet Violet era has the potential to be, even better than Sword and Shield. And Sword and Shield was a very good era. I even liked the early sets, but those mid to late sets were huge. Obviously, Sun and Moon, we had the tag team sets, which were probably the best modern sets we've had. And I think we have the potential in Scarlet Violet to outdo that. And it begs the question of, will they ever actually run out of ideas? Because they can recycle the old ideas so well that people actually want it. It's not the case of, oh, they're bringing this back again. Everyone's just hyped for it.
Because it's been so long between, and again, like you said, they got so much in their arsenal to be able to just go, all right, bang, like we can do so. There's so many options for them. I think one thing to point out too, like they got such a sort of long list of demographics and the age difference between sort of who started with Pokemon till now. So even if it's something not for people like our age, they're going to start hitting people that are now 20, 25 that are still working now on the things they grew up with, and that's just going to keep continuing. So even to please all sort of generations that go on, it's just never going to go away. And they know they can generate, so much revenue from doing that. And again, they can just be sitting on their board meetings and just have endless stuff to do. And it's probably going to go beyond our lifetime. So it's just another reason why Pokemon's never going to go away. It's always going to be here. You got, parents now that have kids that are growing up with Pokemon, and they're sharing, the same thing together. And we didn't have that growing up because it was new. So you're going to see, 2, 3, 4 generations of people growing up with Pokemon. That's what I believe. It's just going to keep going. The game might be less physical and become more digital in one stage, and it's going to move with the times. But I just think, it's never going to go away. Even when I, for my investment, portfolio, even if I, invest in other games, it all ends up reverting back into Pokemon because I know it's not going anywhere. Whereas all these other things, kind of have a shelf life unless you're like a Magic or, even Yu-Gi-Oh! But you can say it's got enough sort of time in the market to not really go in there. But I think there's games that can challenge Yu-Gi-Oh! At the moment and will in the future. So they could lose their spot quite easily. But yeah, no one's ever going to touch Pokemon. And I think the
Yeah.
closest thing that people might think right now is One Piece. We can touch on that quickly before we sort of end this, if you
Yeah.
want. So again, it hasn't been out for long. A lot of hype around it. They're doing very well, which is very unlike Bandai. You know that they seem to have a
Yeah.
history of messing their own games up and killing off their own games to bring something else in. You know they've always got ideas coming in with new games, and unlike Pokemon, they'd rather kill something off and bring something new in, like a new shiny object to milk their consumers, which is their model.
Yeah.
So it surprised me a lot. Again, it's early days, but it's really surprised me the direction they've taken One Piece, and they continue to impress me and surprise me, with what they're doing. And I think it's still on track. Like you mentioned before with reprints, like I knew it was going to happen. I seen the signs, and like you, I sold a lot of my position. I started, buying that when it came out, and I've taken that risk off the table. But by no means I think it's gonna crash or anything right now. But I think it's back to sort of some realistic prices, which is good for the
Yeah.
growth long term. It was never real that the first and second set should be in Aussie dollar terms, $1,000 or
It was
$1,500.
never
That's
sustainable. Yeah.
unrealistic.
It was never sustainable.
So it is. So again, you gotta just put things in perspective and not be sort of hurt if you sort of bought it, at a price and they've reprinted it's come down. It's really just a lesson. I've been through it many times and now I'm more aware, which is why I can make better decisions for myself. I see these things coming because I've been through it before. But yeah, I'm very impressed with the way things are going with One Piece. OPO 9, is like O5 on steroids. It's going to be a huge set. I think that's going to be the main talking point.
Yeah.
PRV might go under the radar now because of that's such a big set, but I don't think God Packs will come to English, which is something maybe people will be hoping for. Again, what's your opinion on One Piece?
I think, yeah, I agree. I think they had to do the reprints. They had to catch up. The game was at risk of dying if they didn't, because if you can't get cards into players' hands, then they're not going to play. Um, and yeah, like you, I'm very surprised that Bandai. I distinctly remember talking about this in certain groups where none of them were involved in One Piece. The traditional Magic, you know, groups, and they were always like, "Oh, but Bandai, the game will die soon. Don't you worry." And I was like, "Do you know what? I think it could be different. Like, I generally think this has to be, if any game is going to succeed long term, it's going to be One Piece because it is the biggest IP there. Um, and they've done well. I mean, Union Arena is coming out in English late this year for US only at the moment. Obviously, it's doing quite well in Japan. It's doing quite well in Southeast Asia. They've obviously got pen signed, serialized
Yeah.
autos and stuff like that. Whatever. The cards look amazing. Bandai make great games. They make very pretty cards. Their dynamic of how they build a game is very good. But as you said, they don't keep them alive. But obviously, OPO 9 has been announced. There's 4 manga rares and a gold manga rare. I think it looks ridiculous. They've got the wanted cards back again as well, which is really nice. The SPs look really cool. Yeah, I sort of it's quite nice. I mean, as I said earlier in the video, I played One Piece. I got a lot of friends that collect and play as well, and I think the subject was always a case of like, if you're getting into the game, how safe is it? And I think a lot of the trophy cards that people have been buying and like the serialized shanks and stuff like that, they're still hugely popular. I think a lot of the singles, like the SRs, dropped in value, but that just makes sense because they were reprinted, and that accessibility option now for players getting into the game means they're not paying £150 for a playset. Which we've seen in our local scene. We had 16 players last week, which was great to see. We didn't have those numbers since we started. We did manage to get a little bit of OPO 7 in the store. Not very much, but we did get a little bit anyway, so some people could open some packs. Yeah, I think One Piece has the potential to be the one that maybe takes Yu-Gi-Oh out. I think it's a hard one. It's a topic that anyone that makes content will love to talk about because it is just a great topic. It gets a lot of people talking, a lot of difference in opinions. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'll still talk about it until then because it's fun and it's exciting. I think One Piece are doing really well, and yeah, I'm curious to see how Union Arena comes out. If it does very well, do Bandai start looking more at Union Arena and less at One Piece? Because at the moment, they haven't got another shiny thing for them to be focused on. Dragon Ball hasn't done very well recently. Digimon hasn't done very well recently. You've got the other ones, what, Battle Spirit Saga, which,
You think they're all on
yeah,
the chopping block, you would have to say. Yeah.
yeah. I said in a video recently about Uni Arena that I suspect that the long-term plan that would make sense would be for Union Arena to house all of the dead IPs. So Dragon Ball and Digimon, they could house them under the Union Arena. I think One Piece is big enough for it to be their maybe flagship, but I think Union Arena could potentially be, their like Bushiroad's Weiss. I mean, they already do loads of different IPs anyway, so it would make sense just to kind of move those into it. But I guess we'll see what happens in October, November when Union Arena comes out in the US, and if it decides to come out, I know there's a lot of players in Malaysia and the Philippines that wanted English language, but they're a little bit disappointed that it's not coming outside the US as it stands, which I'm told is due to licensing issues.
There you go.
I
There's got to
don't,
be a
I
good
don't,
reason for it, or else you're
yeah,
missing out on
it
a lot of money.
exactly,
So,
yeah. They would have done it because they've never done it with any other game before. So the licensing issues sounds like it's quite a plausible reason. Maybe if the game does very well, they'll try to negotiate and sort of kind of rectify that. But I guess we'll just see what happens.
I think that's another video talking about licensing. As you're seeing, like
Yeah,
Weiss, a lot of sets are just in Japanese only due to the same reason they can't print it in
yeah,
English. So they're going to have the same issues. But again, just touching on that again, Magic's doing the same thing with Universes Beyond. They're going into different IPs. They're bringing in a new audience, and I think it can work really well if they can pull it off. So definitely one I'll be watching as well. I do watch the market in Japan. It is doing really well. So again, maybe a subject for another video. But yeah, I think
yep.
if you're happy to leave it there, unless you got some final words you'd like to say.
No, I think that's it. I think I will end it as I always do, and I'm going to ask you for a hot take. It's the only way to end one of these videos. Have you got any hot takes?
I reckon I should be asking you what the hot take is this time. But no, I reckon what I said before, I reckon Altered has the potential to be something huge. Again, it might not happen, but it's got all the makings of being something really big and successful, and all the early signs are there. I don't want to jump the gun too much, but if they can pull off what they said they're going to pull off and they deliver on their product, and we see, the release of the first set, not the Kickstarter, but the actual, first set, the base set, is already done. Pre-orders are already happening here. Distros are already selling it. Stores are already pre-ordering it. If we can see that, gain some traction and then continue to sort of push into the market, I think that's really one to watch as a potential to, shake up the top.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, and one thing I wanted to kind of end on as well is kind of a hot take of my own. Then is
Yep.
I think obviously Lorcana announced that they've got Pixar coming out in 2026, which is obviously a long while away. I think within the next couple of years, I think Star Wars, after the sets that they've got planned, I think the Star Wars card game will end. I don't think it will go. I don't think it's going to be a long-standing card game, and I actually think that there'll be a point within the next few years where Lorcana will leapfrog One Piece. I think One Piece will get to a point
Interesting.
where it's a little bit stagnant, and I think Lorcana's already hit its stagnant point now. And I think when they release the Pixar, I think they'll do Kingdom Hearts as well, and I think that they will leapfrog One Piece. I don't know if that's
Well, they did.
forever,
Yep.
but I think I can see Lorcana being, a lot bigger than One Piece for at least a few years, just because One Piece is a huge IP, Disney is a huge IP, but the Bandai track record still doesn't make me think that they are going to keep. I can't see One Piece being around in 10 years. The
Well, I
card
think
game.
just touching on that quickly, just before we go, like I did speak to a Ravensburger representative, before the game launch, and he did hint out that, don't think as Lorcana as just tied to Disney. This was at the very start. Like they've got the ability to reach out to, to different sort of, sections of whatever IPs that, they can get their hands on. So you got to
Yeah.
think of Lorcana as a bigger brand in itself, not just a Disney product. So again, they might even lose a Disney license or whatever, but I think other IPs may be attracted
Okay.
Lorcana as a brand or as a game, and they can pick up others along the way and maybe branch out there. So look, it is something that is a bit iffy when you talk about licensing, but yeah, look, it's just gonna have to be another one to monitor. But
Yeah.
yeah, look, kind of agree, but don't. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. It's always fun. So, as always, thank you all for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe. There'll be a link in the description to Charlie's socials. Please check out his content. He is doing some amazing work. If you're really interested in the data-driven stuff, then you're really going to enjoy that. That's kind of the next level to a lot of the stuff that I do and, a lot of other content creators do. And, as always, have a great day.
Appreciate that, mate. Hopefully, we can do it again soon.